History hides its darkest screams in places people once called civilized. In the humid shadows of 1850s New Orleans, whispered rumors spoke of a girl who never screamed, never begged, only waited. What followed was not escape, but something far more terrifying. Tonight's story is not about mercy. It is about vengeance born in chains. From the outside, she appeared to be exactly what the plantations demanded her to be: quiet, compliant, and unremarkable. She moved through rooms with her head lowered and her hands folded, her presence so unobtrusive that it barely registered. The mistresses often forgot she was there at all, speaking over her, past her, and sometimes about her as though she were an object placed in the room for convenience. They praised her stillness, calling it good breeding, good discipline, proof that fear could polish a human being into something neat and manageable. Her silence reassured them, because silence felt like emptiness, and emptiness felt safe. None of them questioned why her eyes never wandered aimlessly, why they seemed to take everything in with unsettling precision, why she could enter a room once and later move through it in complete darkness without hesitation. Her obedience was never careless. Every command was followed exactly as spoken, never more, never less, as though she understood the danger of standing out in either direction. When punished, she did not cry out in a way that satisfied cruelty, nor did she resist in a way that invited more suffering. She endured with a stillness that unsettled even those who struck her, a calm that lingered in the air long after the punishment ended. Pain did not break her. It taught her. Each act of cruelty became a lesson, each humiliation another detail etched into her memory. While others prayed for escape or mercy, she learned to observe, to listen, to wait, and to understand the patterns that governed the lives of those who believed themselves untouchable. She learned quickly that plantation mistresses were creatures of habit and fear, bound tightly to their routines and reputations. They spoke freely around her, their voices heavy with resentment, jealousy, and private terror. They complained about husbands who strayed, neighbors who whispered, daughters who disappointed them, and servants they no longer trusted. They revealed secrets not because they trusted her, but because they did not consider her capable of comprehension. She stood nearby while tempers flared and confessions spilled, absorbing every word without reaction. Her silence encouraged their carelessness, and their carelessness fed her growing awareness of how fragile their authority truly was beneath the polished surface. Her intelligence did not announce itself. It hid behind bowed shoulders and lowered eyes, behind movements practiced to appear slow and dull. In truth, her mind worked constantly, threading together details others discarded. She remembered who locked doors and who forgot, who drank too much at night and who relied on medicine to sleep, who feared sickness and who feared scandal more than death itself. She understood how fear could be guided, how guilt could be sharpened, how a single suggestion planted at the right moment could fester into obsession. Each day she added another piece to an invisible structure only she could see, a structure built not from strength, but from the weaknesses of those who ruled over her. By the time the mistresses believed they had stripped her of identity and will, something far more dangerous had taken shape beneath her silence. She had learned the value of being overlooked, the safety of appearing harmless, the power of being underestimated. Every order she followed reinforced their illusion of control, and every illusion strengthened her position. She moved through the plantation world like a ghost no one feared, no one suspected, no one thought capable of intent. Beneath that calm surface, her patience grew heavier with each passing year, her understanding of human cruelty deepening, her awareness of timing and consequence sharpening, waiting within the quiet shell they believed they had created, waiting while the world around her continued to believe that silence meant submission and obedience meant emptiness. The plantation mistresses of New Orleans in 1855 were women of carefully maintained appearances, accustomed to power and privilege. They moved through their grand homes with an air of certainty, expecting obedience from everyone around them, from servants to family alike. Their cruelty was measured, often practiced with subtlety. A harsh word here, a demanding glance there, a punishment delivered just enough to instill fear, but not enough to draw attention from the neighbors. They believed themselves untouchable, confident that wealth and social standing placed them beyond the reach of consequence. They did not see the eyes that followed them constantly, the quiet girl whose stillness they mistook for submission, whose silence they interpreted as weakness. Every whispered command, every scolding glance was catalogued and stored away, though they imagined themselves teaching obedience, not unknowingly cultivating a force they could never control. These mistresses thrived on control, but their control was fragile, dependent on fear, respect, and the careful maintenance of appearances. They never considered that those beneath them were not only watching but learning, interpreting each gesture, each tone, each slight smile or frown. They believed punishment was the ultimate assertion of power, never realizing that it revealed more about their insecurities than about those they dominated. They assumed that everyone, no matter how intelligent or observant, could be shaped into compliance through fear and expectation alone. But in doing so, they neglected the one crucial detail they could never command: the human mind's capacity for memory, for calculation, for waiting. The girl they dismissed as harmless was in fact constructing a map of their weaknesses, a guide to dismantling the very control they prized. They were not merely cruel in their demands, they were cunning in their methods. Some mistresses took pleasure in public shaming, calling out servants for imagined slights in front of the household to reinforce authority. Others used isolation, threatening to separate workers from families or confine them for minor errors. Wealth afforded them indulgences such as servants to spy on one another, creating networks of mistrust that the mistresses believed strengthened their own power. They believed these tactics made them untouchable, unaware that such cruelty also revealed the hidden fractures in their own character. The girl in their midst observed all of this silently, mentally noting which mistress feared confrontation, which dreaded gossip, which sought validation from her peers above all else, which thrived on fear, and which could be manipulated with suggestion alone. Their arrogance was compounded by a sense of inevitability. They thought the social hierarchy was immutable, the roles of mistress and servant permanent, unchangeable. They ignored warnings, brushed aside suspicions, and laughed at those who murmured about potential rebellion, convinced that no one beneath them could ever wield power. They underestimated the girl they had trained in silence, convinced that her lack of outcry proved she had no will of her own. Yet every slight, every punishment, every overlooked conversation became a tool she carried within her, a mechanism of understanding that went far beyond obedience. While they measured her against the standards of fear and control, she measured them against the standards of vulnerability and consequence. In their houses, the illusion of power was everything, and the mistresses clung to it with all the force they could muster. They decorated their halls, enforced strict schedules, and cultivated manners and appearances that disguised the tension simmering beneath. They believed that order could be maintained by hierarchy alone, that wealth could shield them from the consequences of their actions. But the very care they took to control their environments, to dominate and instill fear, made them predictable, readable, and manipulable. The girl's silent observation turned their habits, their fears, and their cruelties into a hidden arsenal, one she carried invisibly, waiting for the perfect moment to transform the illusion of power into the reality of ruin. Her revenge was not born from brute force or open defiance. It was calculated, quiet, and psychological, the kind that gnawed at the edges of the mind rather than the flesh. She understood from the beginning that the plantation mistresses were creatures of ego, pride, and fragile nerves, and she used this knowledge as the foundation of her vengeance. Every action she took, every word she withheld, and every gesture she performed was designed to undermine their sense of control without ever revealing her intent. To the outside world, she remained obedient, unassuming, and invisible. But within the walls of the plantations, her presence became a catalyst for fear, doubt, and chaos that no one could attribute directly to her. She wielded patience as her weapon, allowing the mistress's own behaviors and insecurities to do the heavy lifting of destruction while she remained the silent observer. She began by sowing small seeds of uncertainty. Subtle manipulations, carefully timed errors, and whispered suggestions created fissures in relationships and routines. A mistress who prided herself on order would find that things mysteriously went wrong at critical moments, though the girl's hand was never seen. A sudden misplacement of letters, a minor accident in the kitchen, or a lost piece of jewelry, all seemingly harmless incidents, were enough to make the mistresses question their own competence and the loyalty of those around them. She did not confront or threaten. She allowed suspicion and fear to grow naturally, feeding off the mistress's paranoia and insecurities. Slowly, the households began to unravel, with tension, mistrust, and frustration becoming the invisible enemies she had unleashed. The psychological aspect of her revenge extended beyond mere disruption of daily routines. She became attuned to the fears and weaknesses of each mistress, observing how they reacted under pressure, what made them anxious, and what drove them to rash decisions. One mistress feared scandal above all else, obsessively guarding appearances while ignoring her inner life, while another believed her own cleverness made her untouchable. The girl exploited these traits with meticulous care. A misplaced letter might imply betrayal, a servant's misstep would be exaggerated into conspiracy, a sudden noise at night would suggest intruders. The mistresses, already trapped in their own webs of pride and cruelty, began to crumble under the invisible pressure, and each act of vengeance reinforced the next, creating a snowball effect that moved silently through the households. Her approach relied heavily on timing and subtlety, understanding that overt confrontation would only result in punishment and exposure. She studied the patterns of the plantations, the habits of those in power, and the rhythm of daily life. By choosing her moments with precision, when tempers were high, when fear was ripe, when suspicion could take root, she turned the smallest incidents into catalysts for major disruption. The mistresses, confident in their dominion, failed to recognize that the girl's quiet presence was orchestrating these events, never suspecting that the seeming randomness of their misfortunes was, in fact, the product of careful planning. In her silence, she became both invisible and omnipresent, a phantom whose effects were undeniable but whose identity remained a mystery. As the days turned into months, her psychological warfare became more pronounced. Households were filled with whispers, accusations, and mistrust, and the mistresses found themselves ensnared in fear they could neither understand nor control. Friendships and alliances dissolved, tempers flared, and paranoia became the dominant force within their walls. The girl's vengeance was complete not through direct confrontation, but through the collapse of the structures the mistresses had relied upon for power and status. Each disruption, each moment of doubt, each spiral of fear and uncertainty was a testament to the quiet intelligence and patient calculation of the girl they had underestimated. Her revenge was a shadow moving through the heart of their homes, unseen, untouchable, and devastating. The trail of ruined households left by the girl's vengeance was a testament not to brute force, but to meticulous patience and an unerring understanding of human nature. Each plantation mistress fell victim to a series of seemingly coincidental disasters, minor mishaps that escalated into full-blown crises, eroding the structure of their carefully controlled lives. At first, these incidents were dismissed as bad luck, as unfortunate timing or careless servants. But as the days and weeks passed, patterns emerged that even the most rational could not ignore. Windows left ajar led to thefts, important letters disappeared, and servants whispered of imagined betrayals, all while the girl remained the silent observer, cataloguing every reaction, every slip of control. Her vengeance was insidious, weaving itself into the fabric of daily life until the homes themselves seemed haunted by unseen hands. Her methods were subtle, psychological, and incredibly precise. She never attacked openly, never drew attention to herself, yet the effects of her actions spread like poison through the households. One mistress would find herself doubting her closest confidants. Another would argue constantly with family members over trivial misunderstandings that the girl had carefully orchestrated. A small mistake in the kitchen could become the source of a larger argument, spreading suspicion and resentment throughout the staff. Slowly, the foundations of authority that the mistresses relied upon began to crumble. Trust, which had once been assumed as a right of position and wealth, became fragile, replaced by fear and paranoia that gnawed at the edges of every relationship in the house. The girl's understanding of human behavior allowed her to exploit weaknesses that were invisible to anyone else. She knew which mistress reacted violently to anger, which cowered in fear at gossip, and which masked their anxiety behind forced laughter. She used this knowledge to plant seeds of doubt that would grow unchecked, carefully nudging events so that the mistress's own insecurities led them into patterns of self-destruction. It was never about direct confrontation. She was a ghost moving through the corridors, invisible yet omnipresent, guiding the lives of those around her without leaving a trace. Each act of chaos appeared random, yet each was carefully designed to compound the previous one, creating a domino effect that intensified with time, leaving destruction in its wake. As the households unraveled, the once imposing mistresses found themselves powerless in ways they could not have imagined. Their wealth, status, and authority meant nothing against the invisible influence of the girl they had overlooked. Arguments escalated into permanent rifts. Servants abandoned positions in frustration or fear, and the reputations of these women began to crack under the pressure of repeated misfortunes. Guests noticed the tension, neighbors whispered about strange happenings, and slowly the veneer of control these women had maintained for so long began to peel away. Each household became a reflection of fear, uncertainty, and ruin, a mirror to the quiet genius of a girl who had been underestimated and dismissed for far too long. The devastation extended beyond mere physical or social disruption. It penetrated the very minds of the mistresses themselves. Sleep became restless, paranoia gnawed at their thoughts, and every minor incident was magnified into a potential catastrophe. They questioned their judgment, their competence, and even their sanity, unaware that the girl who had seemed so harmless was the architect of their disintegration. Her revenge was measured, deliberate, and profoundly psychological, leaving no scars on the body but deep, lasting wounds in the minds of those who had wielded power without conscience. In every ruined household, in every whisper of fear, and in every shattered routine, her influence was felt, unseen but undeniable, a haunting force that transformed obedience into the instrument of destruction. The legacy of the girl's vengeance was not written in official records or celebrated in history books, but it persisted in whispers and fearful recollections passed from one generation to the next. She became a ghost story in the minds of those who survived the plantations, a cautionary tale of the dangers of underestimating the quiet, the observant, and the overlooked. Her actions left no signature, no obvious evidence, only a trail of shattered lives, broken households, and women haunted by the memory of inexplicable misfortune. She had become more than a person. She was a force of reckoning, a reminder that cruelty always carries consequences, even when it is carefully hidden behind wealth, status, and authority. The fear she inspired endured far beyond the walls she had walked, lingering like a shadow over the city of New Orleans. Her influence extended in ways that were subtle yet profound. Servants learned to watch, to listen, and to respect the intelligence of those they had previously dismissed. Rumors spread of the girl's uncanny ability to predict misfortune or to be present in moments that should have gone unnoticed. Plantation mistresses, even those untouched directly by her schemes, began to fear the possibility of such a mind hidden among them, capable of dismantling lives with patience and precision rather than violence. The girl's presence became a lesson, one that reminded those in power that dominance based solely on fear and cruelty was a fragile illusion, vulnerable to the quietest, most calculating of adversaries. Time did not diminish the terror she inspired, rather it amplified it. Stories of broken mistresses and ruined households circulated with embellishments that made the girl seem almost supernatural. Some whispered that she could vanish at will, appear where she was least expected, or manipulate events without touching a thing. Others claimed that her gaze alone could instill unease, that those who dared to underestimate her were already doomed. These stories, part fact, part legend, ensured that her impact survived long after the events themselves. She became an archetype of vengeance, a symbol of the invisible intelligence that cruelty often ignores, and a warning that even the smallest, quietest individuals could possess the power to destroy the seemingly mighty. Her actions also left a mark on the social dynamics of the plantations themselves. Mistresses who had once ruled with absolute certainty found themselves second-guessing their decisions, questioning their authority, and constantly wary of the unseen. Servants learned that observation, patience, and strategy could rival brute strength and social hierarchy. The girl had demonstrated that knowledge was power, and that true influence often came not from fear or force, but from understanding the weaknesses, habits, and fears of others. In this way, her legacy subtly shifted the balance of power within the confines of the plantations, leaving an indelible impression on all who lived through the era and those who inherited its stories. Even in obscurity, the girl's story persisted because it touched something primal, the fear of being overpowered not by might, but by mind. She remained faceless in records, yet her actions echoed across time, shaping the cautionary tales told to warn young servants and others who might be dismissed, underestimated, or oppressed. Her vengeance was complete not through spectacle, but through enduring psychological impact, a testament to patience, intelligence, and the quiet accumulation of knowledge. Those who remembered her did so with awe and terror, understanding that the most dangerous adversaries were often the ones who seemed harmless, the ones who waited watched and struck not with fire, but with the invisible force of calculated ruin.